I had done a video earlier on my displeasure with the Congressional Black Caucus, and this particular segment on the Rachel Maddow show makes me even angrier about them throwing their support to Hillary Clinton. She's going to do an interview with Ben Jealous, former head of the NAACP, and Mr. Jealous is going to lay out specifically why he is throwing his support to Bernie Sanders. And I just would like to see the Congressional Black Caucus do the same thing in regard to their support of Hillary Clinton.
That's a little snapshot of the state of the discussion of race and racism in the United States within the Republican presidential field. And I present that just for context. In the Democratic presidential field, as the two Democratic candidates are about to leave states where the electorate was 91% and 93% white, respectively, they're headed into much more diverse states. The Democratic candidates now are fighting tooth and nail, not only to try to appeal to minority voters and specifically to African-American Democratic voters, they are fighting very specifically for the endorsement of leaders within the black community. One of those leaders who chose to plight his trough with Bernie Sanders is the former president of the NAACP, Ben Jealous. He's the youngest ever leader of that organization. Today in Harlem, when Bernie Sanders was there having breakfast with the Reverend Al Sharpton at a nearby table, there was Ben Jealous having breakfast with Senator Sanders' very nice wife, Jane. Ben Jealous joins us now. Ben, thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
How was breakfast?
It was great. Great. And I'd forgotten about Paul. He is such a nightmare.
Well, didn't he once say that the NAACP in Maine, or did he mean the NAACP nationally, should kiss his...
I think he meant nationally.
Yeah.
I think he meant nationally. You know, and he reminds you that historically, like the 1920s, Maine was second only to Georgia for the concentration of the Ku Klux Klan. The funny thing is they were trying to actually keep, not so funny, tragic, in his case, ironic, keep Catholics out.
French Canadians.
Yeah, and there's only two groups that we know of that still exist that were fighting the Klan on behalf of French Catholics, and like him, it's the Knights of Columbus and the NAACP of
Wow,
Maine.
that's an amazing history.
I would like for him to say thank you before he steps down.
Well, before he steps down is a real question there. Look,
Yeah,
I mean,
sorry,
given you are a smart guy, and I say that with some pride because we went to school together. We've known each other for a long time. And I know that you tend to look at things in a big picture, historically inflected way. When you look at things like that, you look at the swath of American history and where we are as a country, do you feel like in the Democratic presidential race right now, you're kind of spoiled for choice? Was it a difficult decision?
It was not hard at all.
Where you feel like there's such a clear distinction, you feel like Bernie Sanders would be good and Hillary Clinton would be bad.
Here's the thing. If Liz Warren was running, it'd be much easier. Because we could get a real progressive and we could get our first woman president. And both those things are big deals. But the reality is that for me, as somebody who grew up in the first generation in the mass incarceration era, there's nothing more important than actually getting things shifted. So we stop spending so much money in prison and we start spending it on education. So our kids, and when they're 18, they don't have to choose essentially, one of three roles in our society. You can go to prison. You can go to college and be deeply in debt, or you can do neither, but still not get the college degree because you can't afford it.
I feel like when I hear Hillary Clinton talk about why she's running and what she would do as president, she's making that same pitch, though. I feel like her policy take on these issues right now is pretty similar to Senator Sanders.
And then you remember 2008, when there were 7 Democrats on stage, and they were asked specifically about if we get rid of the disparity between track and powder, which had sent so many black women to prison, disproportionately black women to prison, would you support applying it retroactively? These women can get out and take care of their families, reunite their kids, get their kids out of foster care. Everybody said yes except for her. She said no. And then you look this year, you have 3 Democrats on stage. One of them, Martin O'Malley, abolished the death penalty state. One of them, Bernie Sanders, opposes it. Now, mind you, things have shifted since 2008. 6 governors, 5 plus Martin, had led their state in abolishing the death penalty. And Hillary Clinton said, yeah, I support the death penalty. And so the concern is that on these issues, she get pushed to the left. If she started off this race, she was in support of for-profit prisons. Now she says she's against it. She took money from their lobby. Now she says she won't. But the concern is, one, she can flip-flop, she can move, and two, she really sets her edge based on where the Republican Party is at the moment. Now the Republican Party generally supports retroactivity, and she does too, but they're still for the death penalty, and so is she.
On that, because you're so drilled down on criminal justice issues,
Sure, just as a distinction.
well, but Bernie Sanders on his website until recently bragged about the fact that he was a supporter of the crime bill in the 90s.
Sure.
And so it's not like he's been an unwavering champion on this issue along. He also shifted on this issue from the same position that she was in.
Well, again, shifting in the 90s. I mean, you have to recall.
And was still campaigning on it recently.
But let's be really clear. You have to recall that in the 1990s, most CBC members supported that 100 times disparity. Most CBC members voted for it. Everybody so lost their mind. There was so much urban violence, right? And I mean, not everybody, but lots of folks now who would like us to forget that they were for those bills. 2008, we're talking about retroactivity. 2016, she supports the death penalty. I don't want to, look, I'm willing to say, let's not hold any of her husband's bills against her. I'm talking about her own actions, and I'm also talking about her own words. I mean, this is a woman who, yes, starts off, supporter of Barry Goldwater. You say, fine, that's her parents. Then she's a lawyer for the Black Panther Party. That's important.
Right. I mean,
right. And Bernie in college was going to jail with the Congress of Racial Equality.
Okay.
All right. I mean, okay.
That's fair enough.
But hold on, right? So then you get to the 80s. She's chairing the Children's Defense Fund. But in the 90s, the Children's Defense Fund, in the 90s, she's pushing the super predator theory. The super predator theory was some children that were so sociopathic by age 6 months they were beyond redemption. It's not just a violation of psychology; it's a violation of theology. It was never used to explain the actions of like young white men in Columbine and those sorts of tragedies. It was almost always used to explain the actions of young urban black men. And so it's that ability. Like, how can you go from being at the side of Mary Wright Edelman to pushing the super predator theory? I can't explain it. It confounds me. And with I think for me as a movement person, it comes down to the trio that Martin Luther King referred to as the giant triplets of evil: racism, militarism, and greed. And when you go by that standard, what you see is Bernie Sanders has been very consistent in fighting racism. He's been very consistent in fighting stupid wars, whether it was Vietnam or it was Iraq. And he's been very consistent in fighting greed. And when you take those with Hillary, it gets confusing. It just gets confusing.
At the end of this, when there is a nominee, if it's Bernie Sanders, obviously you're going to get what you want in terms of this endorsement. If it's Hillary Clinton, do you feel like this campaign will have pushed her to kinds of policy positions that would make you comfortable with her as the Democratic Party nominee, or would you abstain at that point?
I'm working up, and look, I'm somebody who supported Obama early on. Independent expenditure effort to try to help him win the early primary states, because I wanted to see the black electorate fully engaged, asking tough questions, getting competed for, not getting taken for granted. And I find it offensive, quite frankly, when you see so many Hillary surrogates sort of implying that they can take the black vote for granted. Our vote is precious to us. Only question your family is, was it your mother or your grandmother who fought for it? And so for them to say we're going to take it for granted when, just as a country, forget about race for a second, we have the most indebted college students we've ever seen. We have the most incarcerated people on the planet. We have old people who are wondering what is the purpose of Social Security because they're starving even though they're getting it. They're getting $12,000 a year. There's no way to live on that. We have parents who work 60 hours a week and still can't quite feed the kids. And we have record numbers of school kids having backpacks packed for them to go home so they don't starve on the weekend. And then you have people saying, oh, well, we as a party, we can't elect our idealists. We can't elect the ones who really want to change things so we actually open up opportunity. The Republicans can do that. But if we're going to negotiate with them, we're not going to, the sort of establishment says, well, why don't we send in somebody who will appease and be willing to compromise quickly? That's one theory. My theory, trained as an organizer in Harlem at age 17, is game recognizes game. You send your idealists, we'll send our idealists, and a compromise will be a real compromise.
Ben Jealous, former president and CEO of the NAACP, endorsed Bernie Sanders to great calamity in the Democratic establishment when it happened. The game is on right now on these issues that you're fighting for right now. Thank you for being here to talk about it, my friend. It's great to see you. All right, we'll be right.
See, now let's go back to that crime bill in 94. Yeah, Bernie Sanders did vote for that crime bill. But what a lot of people don't know is he got on the floor and basically said that there was a ton of stuff, including that 3 strikes law, that he totally disagreed with, and he outlined what was going to happen. But within that bill was a feature to protect women. And he specifically said he was going to vote for the bill because of that feature only, but that he disagreed with the rest of the bill. But he basically felt like he was voting for the greater good as far as the protection of women. So, yeah, he did, in fact, vote for the 94 crime bill, okay, but his heart wasn't 100% in it, whereas Clinton was actually pushing the bill. And she was jumping up and down about her support of all the features of the bill. So for her to bring up the fact that Bernie voted for the bill, yes, that is true. But he's got mitigating circumstances on his side, whereas she doesn't. Now, back to the CBC. Ben Jealous eloquently stated his reasoning behind his support of Sanders. And I'm going to steal part of a line from one of the guys that I subscribe to, Mr. Superboy 223. One of the things that he always says is, know your history, and I'm going to change a little bit of the second part of his phrase, utilize your dollar wisely. The know your history part is where I'm going with this. Black people need to know the history of the Clintons and all the things that they've done to damage us, and for them just to flock willy-nilly to the Clintons for no reason other than name recognition and quote-unquote Bill was the first black president, which is bullshit, just shows ignorance on people's part. They need to dig down into this thing and actually see which one of these candidates is going to do the best job for them. And in my opinion, that the best job will be done by Bernie Sanders.